Welcome back, everybody. John Arvosis here with the Arvosis Report. Happy New Year. It is Monday, January 2nd. I guess I should have known the date. And we are here to talk again about Ukraine. Anyway, say hi, everybody. Let people know where you are from, and I will get the TikTokers rolling here on my other screen. Yeah, so New Year's is not really my holiday. I think I told you guys I don't really believe in it, but I don't think it's a real holiday. But that's fine. As they say, for those who celebrate. Anyway, yeah, I haven't seen you all year. Exactly, the dad jokes. All right, hey TikTokers, Ashley. Anyway, you guys know the routine. Give a quick hello shout out where you're all from, if you would. And then as soon as we get up to enough people have arrived, I will start the show. Oh boy, Wales, St. Louis. What else we got going on here? Bonjour, bonjour. And we'll see if the sound goes out again for the YouTubers. Nothing I can do about it. Good crowd on TikTok today. Hopefully everybody's back after the holiday. I think people were kind of disappearing, but hey, Munchkin from Ireland, how are you? Hey, Harold. What else we got? What else we got here? Norway, Otan. Someday I'll remember you're there. Hey, Lisa. Oh, hey, Lisa. How are you? That's funny. Carlos Bond. Thank you, Carlos, for that. All right, guys. I'll start doing my introductions. Well, thank you for the hat there, Annie, while we're waiting for the TikTokers to arrive. So I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. I'm going to adjust my screen. Thank you for the glasses, Uncle Crazy. This is my daily show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine. The way this works is for about the first half hour or so, I will brief you guys on the latest news. And then for the second half of the show, I'll take your questions. We'll talk about the issues on TikTok. Submit your questions via the Q&A link that you will find in my profile on TickTock. And for the rest of you, obviously use the comment box at the bottom. I do appreciate your gifts as I'm doing this full time and for free. And your guys' gifts actually pay my bills. So I appreciate it. And you help me keep doing this. So thank you for keeping those coming. And let me mention really quick as a starter, I want to thank everybody. We reached our goal. We were doing some Christmas fundraising for a variety of things, including buying flashlights for some Ukrainian staff of a charity that delivers meals and supplies to families and children affected by the war. Thank you, Beirut, for that. So we raised $1,560, which let us buy 30 excellent flashlights for the staff of the charity. So thank you all for chipping in on that. Let me get rolling. So here's the thing. There were a couple big stories today. I'm going to start with the big story of the day, which was this attack the Ukrainians did against the Russians in eastern Ukraine. And it was one hell of an attack that they did. I mean, this was hugely important what the Ukrainians did today, hugely significant. And then after I give you a couple more stories of the day, I'm going to spend some significant time talking about this interview with Danish intelligence officials about Vladimir Putin. Really interesting interview. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's start first. So Ukraine reportedly, and the Russians are admitting this as well, so it happened. Ukraine reportedly attacked a Russian military housing. It was housed in a vocational school in eastern Ukraine, right next to the regional capital of Donetsk. Donetsk is here, okay? The region, Donetsk, is here, and the city of Donetsk is here. The town is right to the east of it. It's called Makivka, but it's pretty much the larger Donetsk area, I guess you'd say. And it is an area controlled by the Russians. It is Ukraine. And what happened was the Russians had a bunch of new conscripts. So these are the new troops who were drafted in September, right? When Russia had that big 300,000 men call up in September. Well, they put a bunch of the men on New Year's Eve. I mean, every part of this story is beyond idiotic what the Russians did. So New Year's Eve, they've got 400 guys, at least 400, actually, excuse me. They had The Ukrainians are saying they had over 700 men in this building, okay, in this school. And the school must have had dormitories. The Russians got 700 men in this school, and the Ukrainians attack. The Ukrainians attack with the HIMARS. Reports are that the Ukrainians used probably about 4 of the HIMARS rockets. The HIMARS rocket system is this rocket system that the U.S. provided to Ukraine that allows it to attack with very good precision, right? That they can really hit their target well. Well, the Ukrainians reportedly launched 4 missiles into this dormitory for at least 700 Russian troops, and it blows up. Well, why does it blow up? And again, this is how bad the Russians are at this. Thank you, blah, blah, for the hedgehog, or Henry for the hedgehog. This is how bad the Russians are. The Russians put at least 700 of their troops in a dormitory within reach of the HIMARS, within range of the HIMARS. And what else were the Russians storing in the dormitory? What do you think the Russians were storing in the dormitory? Ammunition. Thank you for the hat, truthful. The Ukrainians hit the dormitory to hit the Russian troops. The ammunition supplies are there as well. The ammunition goes up. The entire building explodes. I'm still visiting Mom for another week, so we're going to keep getting calls here. The entire building blows. The Ukrainians say that they killed 400 Russian troops, that 300 more Russian troops were injured in the blast. The situation is so bad that the Russians had to come out today and admit the attack happened, admit the attack was successful. Okay, the Russians admitted that the Russians claim 63 men were killed in the attack. Now, 63 men, thank you, Kanowski, for the celebration. 63 men would be very significant. I mean, killing that many in just one attack, in one boom like that, that's huge. The fact that the Russians are admitting that is a big deal to start with. But we all know if the Russians are admitting that the Ukrainians killed 63 Russian troops, then the number is way bigger than that, right? The other reason that we know that this attack was significant is the Russian military bloggers are livid. Now, the Russian military bloggers, I've told you guys before, they're basically the Russians, and I'm not quite sure why Putin thought this was a good idea. My guess is, thank you, Paramarine, for the hat. My guess is that Putin was seeing how the Ukrainians were using the internet to promote their side of the war. And right, the Ukrainians have been so brilliant at all of their marketing. Thank you, Marcy. That I think Putin wanted to do the same. So Putin decided to either embed with his troops or near the troops a bunch of private citizens with military experience who were basically blogging about the war. They were writing publicly about what was happening in the war. Well, Putin, of course, mind you, I will say this. Mind you, what Putin thought was going to happen, and we know this, he thought they were going to take Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, in 3 days. He thought pretty much the war was going to be over in 10 days. So of course they were thinking, hey, let's put all of these propagandists that blog, right, these private propagandists in with our troops because they can tell the world how successful we were. Well, what's happened instead is that these bloggers, these Russian military bloggers, have been telling the world about how screwed up the Russian military effort has been, and they've been attacking the Russian military itself. So what's happened now, and I was just telling folks, just to tell the new TikTok folks who are here, we're talking about this tremendous attack the Ukrainians did New Year's Day in Ukraine, literally right after midnight. So it was shortly after midnight. The Ukrainians, using the HIMARS, attacked a Russian military barracks. The Russians were using a vocational school to house their military. They were dumb enough to put 700 plus troops in one building to sleep. They then, again, really dumb, decided to put military ammunition storage in the same building with the Russian troops. The Ukrainians blew it up. The building was my dog agrees. Yeah, you on board, Sash? The Ukrainians blow it up. The building disappears. The Ukrainians think 400 Russians are dead. Even the Russian military bloggers admit that several hundred Russians are dead from this. I mean, astounding what the Ukrainians did. Now, as always, this one attack isn't going to change the war, right? But if they killed several hundred Russian troops, and it looks like they did in one attack, they have now, what you've got is the military bloggers have now gone public and said this is an atrocity. And again, they're not criticizing the Ukrainians. They're criticizing the Russian government. They're criticizing the generals. One of the stories that came out was that the troops, and by the way, I'm sure this is true. It probably is true. But that the Russian troops, these were the new recruits, mind you, too, that the new recruits, it was New Year's Eve. They were all on their cell phones. So 700 of these guys are in a barracks and they're on their cell phones calling their girlfriends and their wives back home, right? The Ukrainians were also able to locate it, the story goes, because so many of these guys were on their phones, they went, holy cow, we've got 700 Russians in one building. Well, the military bloggers got pissed off and said, how dare you accuse the troops of being to blame? So this has now caused a lot of friction in the Russian government, in Russian military circles. Great news for Ukraine across the board. Okay, a few other quick stories, and then I want to jump to our big story today, which is talking about Vladimir Putin, his health, and his future. Israel's government. Israel just got a new government. Same old government is back again. Netanyahu is prime minister again. Because it's a coalition government, he had to align with some very far-right parties. It is now the most conservative government, they say, in Israeli history. What did the government do? They turned around today and started sucking up to Russia. Basically, it looks like Netanyahu's government thinks that that the old government was a little too critical of Russia's role in Ukraine. So now, thank you, Inspired Woman. Now they're resetting the relationship with Russia. I will say this, and this particularly pisses me off because I'm of a certain age, as the saying goes, that I grew up seeing how much Israel was attacked by its neighbors. You know, a lot of folks I think that are younger, all you got to grow up with, or maybe you or your friends or whomever got to grow up with, was seeing Israel doing really obnoxious things in the Middle East, right? You never got to see the stuff early on when Israel was getting bombed every day, right, by the Arab governments, by Arab terrorists, blowing up civilian airplanes. I mean, horrific terrorism against civilians, okay? So I'm of a certain age where I'm more sympathetic. I'm more sympathetic to Israel than many people might be, but I am equally sympathetic to the Palestinians, but I'm really sympathetic to both. Having said and the reason I'm telling you this is, even with all of that, okay, even with all of that, that I am somebody who is generally pretty sympathetic to Israel, this makes me sick what Israel is doing. Israel is sucking up to Russia. Israel is sucking up to Russia specifically with regards to what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Russia is going after a country run by a Jew, a country that contains a lot of Jews. Israel is a country that contains a lot of Russian Jews who had to flee Russia because Russia is supremely anti-Semitic. The chief rabbi of Moscow had to flee Russia. He's not even in the country because his family was in so much danger because he disagreed with the war. This is how much Russia likes Jews. And Israel turns around when there is a genocide happening in Europe. And mind you, Israel, genocide, Europe. Do those words seem familiar, Israel? I don't know. Maybe. And they turn around and go, you know what? We'd rather suck up to the guy who's committing genocide because we think it's in our interests. As I said, somebody who considers himself a friend of Israel, these guys are destroying themselves, absolutely destroying themselves. In any case, all right. Let me move on. The European Union ambassador says that the European Union has decreased its oil imports by 90% from Russia in 2022. So that's good news. Let me do a quick reset, and then we will start the discussion about Putin's health and Putin's future. So I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. Just to remind folks, or not even really remind folks, to tell the new folks on Twitter who are here, this is my daily show Monday to Friday Eastern at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central Time, where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine, and then I take your guys' questions and we talk about those afterwards. Please do follow me on YouTube. I was going to say TickTock. I always want to call TickTock TickTock. On TickTock, please do follow me on YouTube, and please do keep the gifts coming, guys, on TikTok and YouTube. Thank you, Lionheart, for the butterflies there, because I am supported. I am reader support, viewer supported, as they say on PBS. I make my money from you guys. I'm trying to do this full time, and you guys are supporting me, so thank you. So the big story for today I want to talk about for a while is a really interesting interview that was done with the man, presumably man, it could be a woman, at Danish intelligence, at the intelligence services of Denmark, who is in charge of Russia, of all the Russia intelligence, all the Russia, spy information they're able to get. He did a remarkable interview with an organization, with an outfit called Berlingske. I'm not going to pronounce it correctly. And clearly, Danish intelligence felt that it was important to get this story out there, so they allowed a bunch of their intelligence to go public. I want to tell you, a number of things that they concluded, because it's really interesting about the war overall and about Putin. Let's start with the war. Their main conclusion, thank you, user, Money Gun, or thank you, user, for the Money Gun. Their main conclusion from Danish intelligence is that the invasion of Ukraine did not fail because Russia is corrupt, because the money wasn't funneled to the military, because their logistics was so bad. They say the reason the war failed, thank you, Harold, and the reason that Ukraine did not lose within 2 weeks, which, by the way, Danish intelligence had predicted that Ukraine would lose in 2 weeks. The reason Ukraine didn't lose was because of Vladimir Putin. They say that Vladimir Putin screwed up royally going into this war. For example, they say that it was because of Putin that the Russians believed that they would be welcomed with flowers when they invaded Ukraine. It wasn't because Putin was given bad intelligence. It's because Putin himself had said, no, I know better. We are going to be welcomed, as saviors. They were not. This is from the intelligence official himself. It was because of Putin that everything was planned by a narrow circle of people. In other words, the war was planned by a narrow circle of people and only shared through the ranks of the military at the very last minute. Because of this, the Russian forces simply did not know what they were supposed to be doing. Right? It was also because of Putin's decision to call it a special military operation rather than a war that the Russian army was suddenly 30,000 infantry soldiers short for the invasion. They didn't have enough men because of Putin's decision, but also, and we had heard this right before the invasion, that some of the local military officials on the ground, in Russian, the Russian military officials were saying that they didn't have enough men, and Putin said invade anyway. The Danes say that Putin is also still interfering with the war in a micromanaging way, meaning rather than having his general be in charge of the day-to-day and frankly empowering military officials that are lower in the ranks to plan their own local strategy and tactics, Putin has still been orchestrating strategy from the top. He recently had a meeting with the entire staff of command of the war in Ukraine. And basically what he did was he got all the top generals together in a room, like it looks like it was 20 or more of these generals, and started asking them for advice. Thank you, Ben, for the hat. Now, that might sound like a nice idea. Thank you, Deadike, for the meteors there. That might sound like a nice idea that he reached out to the generals. The problem is, as the experts say, and as this Danish intelligence official said, it's the top general's job. Putin's got his top general. The top general's in charge of the war. The top general has to be the one that reaches out to the other generals to get advice, to get feedback, or whatever you want to call it. It's not Putin's job. Thank you, ETM Sanders, for that. It's not Putin's job, and that it totally screws up the chain of command and everything else, having Putin talk to the generals. And it's Putin micromanaging the thing. Oh, hey, Christian, we're talking, or is that, yeah, we're talking about Denmark right now. In any case, so Putin is still micromanaging the war. Bad. Actually, I'll remind folks what it is we're talking about in case anybody new comes on TikTok or elsewhere. We're talking about a Danish intelligence official who is in charge of Russia for Danish intelligence in Denmark, who did an interview that was released today talking about what Danish intelligence's assessment is of Putin, of how the war is going, of why the war is going so badly, etc. Now, let me tell you a little bit more. He says that the Russians almost won the war. Now, this is something that I read the other day. It was either in the Washington Post or the New York Times, big story. But basically, you've got north of Kiev, the capital, and I'm trying to recall, but I want to say, I think it's about here. Kiev is right here, okay? So pretty much just north a little bit of the capital. Remember that first month of the war when the Russians came invading from all sides practically, but from the north in particular, they came down and they were trying to take Kiev. And the goal was they were going to capture Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, in 3 days, right? Thank you, Kay. Well, the Russians actually almost did. Now, according to this story and according to other things I've read, the Russians came in. They were going to take an air base north of Kiev called Hostomel, and they were going to then basically bring in thousands of troops via air flights, and they were going to use that to just take over Kiev, the capital, and they would have done it. Well, what happened was, and this wasn't from Danish intelligence, this is more publicly been written about, but I believe the Americans may have gotten wind of Putin's plan to take the airfield, and we warned the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians then moved all of their planes out of the airfield. It's like it's their major airfield. Moved their planes out of the airfield so that the Russians weren't able to surprise the Ukrainians and blow up their air force. And what happens? The Russians take the field, but with a small group of men, and in order to bring the reinforcements in, the Russians have to fly them in. But the Russians can't fly them in because the Ukrainian Air Force escaped. So the Ukrainian Air Force is now flying around, shooting down Russian planes that are trying to bring troops in. So the Russians were not able to bring in any reinforcements. And what happens? Ukraine takes the air base back, and Russia loses the war of the North, basically. So kind of amazing. What was the other thing here? Oh, this was an interesting point too. So we're talking about Danish intelligence putting out a interview today, talking about their analysis of the war in Ukraine. They said that they are not worried about Russia launching a major offensive in the coming months. Now, what we have heard from the Ukrainians have been worried about Russia possibly launching some, major attack in the next end of January, mid-February. They've talked about. The Danes are saying that, yes, Russia could still do attacks. They can still do offensives, right? They could attack towns. They could do lots of things. But the idea of them doing some massive attack akin to what they did in February of this year, February of last year, I should say, right? Last February, in terms of them doing another attack, like, for example, one of the concerns is that Russia's going to come back from the north and try to take Kiev again. Right? And they would basically need, 50, 100,000 troops to do that. What the Danish intelligence is saying is they don't have the troops. They don't have the equipment. Even if they use new troops, the troops have old equipment now because all the good equipment has been destroyed, that there is no way for years that the Russians will be able to launch any kind of major offensive. And again, it'll take maybe 3 to 5 years. I'll do a quick little reset and then let's keep going here. I see Bash Brannigan. Bash, I will take I'll do a reset and then take your question. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. We are talking about the latest news from Ukraine. This is my show Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Please do follow me on TikTok, follow me on and subscribe on YouTube, etc. And check out my Discord. We can go to my Discord. I'll go to my Discord for a few minutes afterwards. I've got a Discord set up at discord.aravosis.com. I think I put it away. One of the neat things I've got with my Discord, I don't have it here. I put it away probably. I've got auctions going on. Am I seeing? Nope. Put away. Nope. Auction's been put away. I've got auctions going on where we auction off for the benefit of Ukraine and myself as well. A lot of things I've had imported from military items we've had imported from Ukraine, military patches, things like that. What we've got going on now are the Azov-style bracelets. The bracelets made from Azov-style steel, where the Ukrainian troops, the 2,000 troops, were holed up for 2 months against 14,000 Russians. And the Ukrainians made these wonderful bracelets. We got our hands on a number of them. They're not making any more. This is it. It's the last batch of steel. And we're able to buy them. We're going to be auctioning them off. Half of the proceeds will go back to our charity work for Ukraine. Half of it will go to support my work here with you guys. So thank you. I appreciate you guys' help. All right, let's keep going here. Red lines. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me first go with the question here we had from Bash Brannigan, and then we're going to talk about red lines. So Bash Brannigan is saying, Canada is attempting to confiscate seized assets of Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich to go to Ukraine construction. Could the U.S. or U.K. do the same? I can talk about U.S. So the issue with the U.S. is, in order to use Russian assets for something else, we actually have to get the assets away from the Russians. Thank you, Leash, for the hat. Meaning, So far, we have frozen the Russian assets, but we have not taken them. I think maybe the word is seize. We have not appropriated them. We have not taken them. We do not own them. They are simply frozen in the bank. The Russians, the assets still belong to the Russians, okay? But they cannot spend them, but we cannot spend it because it still belongs to Russia. So it would be akin to the police. Okay, look at it like a domestic crime story in your own country, okay? The police arrest you. They freeze your bank accounts, okay? Now you've got to go to trial, right? Well, while the trial's going on, they can't just spend the money in your bank account just because they froze your bank account. The bank account doesn't belong to the police. It doesn't belong to the government. It is yours, but the government has frozen it while they're investigating criminal activity. A similar concept applies to the Russian assets that have been frozen by the U.S. and around the world. In the law, we call it, I'm a lawyer as well, we call it due process, which means there has to still be a legal process for taking this money and giving it to the Ukrainians, for example. We can't just say, well, we froze the Russians' money, let's just take it. I wish we could, but we can't. So I know there were some recent things passed in the U.S. Congress. The Brits, I thought, were maybe looking into this as well. I'm not really an expert on how this appropriation goes of the monies, but the point is there's got to be a process for it to happen, and it's got to be a legal process in each country. So that's what would be holding it back. Thank you, Allie, for the lights there. Let me tell you really quick. Oh no, let's talk about Putin now. Okay, let's talk about Putin. So let's talk about Putin. First thing we're going to talk about is Putin's red lines. Now, the red lines are the idea that, oh boy, there's something that Putin will let us do, and there's something Putin won't let us do. For example, one of the big red lines, and these are things we're supposed to be afraid of, right? One of Putin's big red lines is supposed to be Crimea. Crimea is the Ukrainian territory that the Russians invaded and stole in 2014. And we're supposed to believe that, oh boy, it's one thing if Ukraine goes and tries to liberate all of its territory here that Russia stole this year, but if Ukraine tries to liberate Crimea, the territory Russia stole in 2014, that's a red line. And Putin would go nuclear if that happened, right? So this issue of red lines and how, oh boy, we better be very careful not to make Putin angry. Well, Danish intelligence has an opinion on that. Let me read you the quote directly. This isn't really about what's happening in the battlefield, although, of course, things are going really badly for Russia. It's just as much to do with Putin personally being humiliated and appearing to be weak. And Putin can't stand appearing to be weak. So there is this combination of factors that might be dangerous, he says. So meaning, he's saying, yeah, there are things that could happen that he's not going to say that Putin would use nukes, but meaning there would be a greater risk of Putin doing something rash, okay? But he's adding that what is going to determine that, thank you, Daniel, what is going to determine if Putin does something rash isn't some predetermined notion of oh, well, here's what will make Putin go rash. If we defend Crimea, if Ukraine attacks Crimea, that will be a red line for Putin and he'll go nuclear. He said it's not that. With Putin, it's much more a general concept of he doesn't like being humiliated. That's when he's at his most dangerous, but it's hard to say in advance whether Crimea being liberated would be the most humiliating, etc. He goes on, listen to this. He then talks about Crimea itself. On the other hand, this is the interesting one, okay? Listen to this one. On the other hand, there is no guarantee of making the world a safer place by stopping the Ukrainian counteroffensive in time before it gets to the Crimean Peninsula and seeking a negotiated settlement, as some voices in the West are suggesting. I'm going to read you in a second more there. What he's saying is, just because some people in the West are saying, oh, let Ukraine get its territory back, except Crimea. As long as we stop Ukraine before they get Crimea, we put pressure on them, we say we're cutting off your weapons, then we let Russia have Crimea, we make Ukraine accept the peace plan, and everybody's happy, and this stops Russia from nuclear war. Thank you, Zach, or Ryan, Zach Ryan, whichever. He says no. He says if we do anything that Putin might see as weakness, he might think that he can go further than what he is actually able to do, and then things might get really ugly. What he's saying here is that if we stop Ukraine from invading Crimea, Maybe that will save Putin from being humiliated and Putin won't do something crazy. He said, but equally important, it may convince Putin that we are weak, that we are afraid. And if Putin thinks we're afraid and we stopped Ukraine from invading Crimea because we were afraid of Putin, that could convince Putin to do even more invasions. Now, he didn't give details, but we're talking he could invade NATO. He could invade NATO allies like Poland. He could go after Moldova, could go after the rest of Ukraine. Deposing Putin, this was interesting too. One of the things that Danish intelligence weighed in on today was this issue of whether Putin could be overthrown. Now, he said that he thinks Putin for sure will get reelected or whatever in 2024. He said it's less clear what would happen in 5 years. Like, will Putin be around in 5 years? Not so sure. Listen to what he said. We don't see anyone about to depose Putin. But if we did, the FSB, which is, like security, domestic security, KGB style, would see. If we saw, I'm adding more words here because I think this might have been translated from Danish. He's saying, if we saw anyone who could overthrow Putin, domestic security services would also see it, and they would probably sort it out very quickly. Meaning, if we saw any possibility of Putin being overthrown, his own security people would see the same opportunity and they would kill the people before they got to Putin. No one among the Russian elites is strong enough, as their power flows from Putin. And as things currently stand with the Russian population, the Danish intelligence does not see a popular uprising happening either. But our biggest uncertainty concerns his health, or someone removing him because of his failing health. Now let's talk about his health. He says, he says he does not believe that Putin is suffering from a terminal illness. He's not dying, but he is suffering from chronic pain because of severe falls and accidents he had. Putin fell off a horse in the early 2000s. He has had fall accidents playing judo or doing judo and playing ice hockey. And he says, thank you, Paramarine, for that. He says that this is an interesting point, I thought, because remember when Putin was meeting somebody a couple months ago, and he was sitting at, it was one of the only times Putin was at a short table. Usually he's at that crazy long table. And remember, Putin's at the short table with the guy, and there's a picture of the two of them at the table, and Putin is hanging on to the edge of the table like this, and he looked like he was terrified, like he was afraid of letting go, right? What Danish intelligence says is that's why Putin tends to sit and grab things tightly. It's to ease the pain. So somehow, I don't really understand, but somehow holding on very tightly helps ease the pain. Thank you for the hat there, Jazz. The Danish intelligence believes that Putin did have a form of cancer, or does, possibly thyroid cancer, but it was treated and it is not deadly. It is not deadly anytime soon. Now, this is one of the points that I've been raising with you guys before too, is lots of people have cancer. Some people get cured. Other people go into remission. Other people, you could have prostate cancer and it could go on for 30 years, right? And you die of something else. So they think that he did have cancer of some kind, probably. It very likely could have been thyroid cancer. But again, this isn't killing Putin right now. Now, the interesting point they did make was they think that the treatment Putin got for his cancer included hormones, and the hormones potentially messed with Putin's head. And one of the possibilities with the hormones, and I actually had mentioned this at the beginning of the year when I was first starting my show. I had told you guys I had talked to a friend of mine in Washington who knows these things. I'll leave it at that. They're a person who knows these things, who told me that Putin, they believed perhaps Putin was using steroids. And one of the issues with steroids, or in this case, they're saying hormones from Danish intelligence, is it can give you sort of delusions of grandeur, of your own self-importance. And one of the things Danish intelligence wonders is to what degree the war happened because Putin was being medicated because of the cancer, and it put him, it wasn't killing him, but it put him in a mindset. It affected his mind that made him more arrogant, more egotistical, and more sort of megamaniacal, that he felt, I can do this. I can win this war. It doesn't matter all of those who say I can't, right? I've got a little bit more. Oh, last point, final point, and then we'll go to the questions here. The final point was the quote, he will not die of the illness, but it may lead some Russian elites to decide that they need someone stronger at the helm. It's our firm impression, the Danish intelligence says, that part of the elites in Russia do see that they are headed down the wrong track. And the question will be, and this is me saying now, the question will be eventually, will those elites somehow organize enough to take Putin down? Will they grow enough, right? That they will they grow in number? The opponents were basically, they don't like a weak leader. They don't want to be perceived as weak. And if Putin is perceived as physically frail, whether because of the back or something else, that could be it. Couple people were weighing in on this. Mr. White was saying anabolic steroids definitely bring the crazy in you if you're prone to it. That's what my friend was saying. Steroids can also give you a puffy face. Now, one thing that's interesting, that what the Danish, I hadn't mentioned this in what I wrote down, but when I read the article, one thing the Danish intelligence mentioned was that Putin's face this year, if you notice they said how his face has gotten very round, right? And I don't know if they said oval or round, but they said that was also evidence of hormone use. Moon face. There you go. Now, is the moon face hormones, or what is normally causes the moon face? I see Poppy was weighing in about moon face. But they were saying that was evidence of using some of the drugs that were probably in response to his cancer, which is very interesting. Let me do a quick reset, and then we'll continue here, since now we're at the Q&A part of the show where we can talk about this and everything else. Well, there you go, prednisone. That was what... Now, actually, wait a minute. I'm forgetting now. Hormones. When we say, but steroids are not the same as hormones. I feel like I'm being stupid asking this. Steroids aren't hormones, though. Are they? Right? Because steroids is what my friend had told me that they thought Putin was using, and that he was using it basically because he was in pain and it was to eliminate the pain. Okay, they're not the same thing. That's what I thought. A steroid is technically a hormone. Oh, the nurse is weighing in and saying they're technically the same. Okay, interesting. Now, I do know that thyroid disease as well, trying to get your drugs regulated can make you crazy. That I know. Okay, sorry. Number of people weighing in here. Steroid is one of many hormones. You know what? Then maybe this is the same story, because my friend was saying that they were suspicious that Putin was using steroids. The Danish intelligence is saying their suspicion is Putin was using hormones, and that they were regarding his illnesses. And my friend was thinking, because he was in pain or something, and possibly even COVID, that if his lungs were affected, you take steroids, and steroids definitely open up your lungs. But if you've got long-term lung damage and you're somebody like Putin, you say, give me more steroids. I've got to keep my lungs open, and I don't want to. Think about what happened with Putin and New Year's. Did you see his New Year's speech? Putin gets up, and it may not have been his New Year's speech, but it was a speech around New Year's. It was like New Year's Day or something. And he's standing in front of these troops, and he must have coughed 3 or 4 times within half a minute. He was not in good shape. It was crazy. Because mind you, these things are recorded. The fact that he was hacking, and hacking 3 or 4 times within half a minute, means that was the best recording they were able to get of him. Right? So who knows? Oh, and they were the fake troops and everything. Yeah. Sip of water. All right, let me do a quick reset, and then let's do the question, guys. I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine and then take your guys' questions. Please do continue to support me. I am independent media. I'm doing this for free, and I am doing it full time. So I appreciate your guys' support with the gifts on TikTok, just like Nancy did right there. One of my favorites is the Galaxy. Thank you, Nancy. And with the gifts on YouTube, and with these super chat questions. I appreciate it, guys. Let me keep going. I've got a store set up as well, store.aravosis.com, where you can find a lot of Ukrainian-themed stuff. Part of the proceeds go to help out my humanitarian work in Ukraine. Basically, if you want, go to aravosis.com, or just the link in my profile for you guys on TikTok. Actually, I did not remove... I'm already forgetting again. I did not remove my link for the donations. Let me do that right now, because we don't need to accept any more money. Give me a quick second, guys, and then we'll do the questions. I've got to go to my link tree. I just realized I need to pull down my link of the link tree. because we've got enough donations for the various charity stuff we did. So don't do that. But I was going to say, go to aravosis.com and you can find, thank you, that Jazz, for that. Give me a quick second here. I realize that one link is up for the fundraiser. I want to take it down. Okay, the flashlights, we are done. There we go. The flashlights are done. Okay, you can go to aravosis.com and you can find all my links, my PayPal, my Discord that I will be on after the show for a few minutes, hanging out and chatting, my store, and also my Patreon. I've got a Patreon too. So if you've been following my work for a while and like it, please consider going over to my Patreon, patreon.com/aravosis. And thank you, Heather. And maybe chip in $5 a month or something if you can afford it, and help me out. It would help me out a lot, actually, to be able to keep doing this work on a regular basis. So thank you, guys. All right, let's dive in here. So let me first look for one moment here. I will try to pull up TikTok questions. Remember, on TikTok, you can go to my profile, hit the Q&A button, and post a question there. Let me see here. And then, Ben, I will get to yours. Oh, Bakhmut. I don't know that I've got one on this. Can you give us an update on Bakhmut today? They were hit very heavily over New Year's, and I'm wondering where the line stands and how it's looking. I don't have anything on Bakhmut today. There wasn't, not a lot changed anywhere. The talk today was a little bit of what was going on north of Bakhmut, which is this highway 66 or whatever that is connecting the towns of Svatove and Kremina, which is not very far north of Bakhmut. It's the other battle. There's two big battles going on in the east. One is the Russians trying to take Bakhmut, and the other is the Ukrainians trying to take Kremina. That was sort of more in the news today. I saw nothing significant about Bakhmut, to be honest. So I just don't have anything, because there was nothing in the news today that when I was scouring the news. Let me, here we go. Ben. Hey, Ben, thank you for this. Ben asks on Super Chat, do you think Putin would use nukes in Ukraine? No. Or if he is overthrown by those around him, would they use them or sue for peace now they've removed him? That's interesting. The first question is, would Putin use nukes? I've talked about this a lot, but I don't mind giving the quick summary again, because it seems to be, the sort of the topic everyone's interested in. Oops, hang on. I'm trying to find I took my chapstick out. There it is. That's thank you for the glasses there, Nick. So sorry, lips get really chapped in the winter. So would Putin use nukes in Ukraine? I don't think so. The quick analysis on that is, the military folks say there is no military advantage to Putin using nukes. So in other words, it doesn't get him anything. If Putin were to use these small nuclear weapons to blow up Ukrainian troops, he'd kill some Ukrainian troops. Thank you, Megwood, for that. But it wouldn't advance the Russian war effort. It's not like, if Putin used some strategically placed nuclear weapons, he could get rid of the Ukrainian troops and win. Nobody thinks that would happen. So militarily, thank you, Addie, militarily, there's no great reason why he would do it, okay? That's the first reason. Second of all, I love the trolls. We have the best trolls. I have to say that we just have the best trolls. Second of all, Putin could try to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine to try to convince the Ukrainian public that they need to cave and give up, right? Does anybody think the Ukrainians are going to give up, especially if Putin were to use a nuke? Now, mind you, a lot of Ukrainian civilians would freak out if he used a nuke. Yes. Would the Ukrainians say, okay, you've used a nuclear weapon, we're going to give you our country now to destroy it and kill all of us? Or would the Ukrainians say, we are so freaking pissed off now that, so help me God, we're going to let every last citizen die before we give up? It's going to be the second, I think. There's no way. So the question then becomes, why would Putin do it? Third, what will NATO do in response? Part of Putin's Putin's analysis has got to be cost benefit. What's the risk of using nukes in Ukraine? What's the benefit of using nukes? We've already said, if he uses the nukes, there's really no military benefit. He can't get Ukraine to cave, and he won't get any military advantage by dropping the nukes on Ukrainian troops. So we can't find a real advantage. We can find a lot of risks involved, a lot of negatives. For example, would NATO enter the war if Russia used a nuke? They might. Would NATO bomb the Russian fleet in Sevastopol in southern Ukraine. They might. So there's a lot of, I think NATO would have to do something sort of horrific, something big, catastrophic, to use Joe Biden's word, if the Russians were to use nukes, because we could not afford a situation where the message was sent around the world that, you know what, you can use nukes. It's okay. It's okay. As long as you use a small nuke, go ahead. India, Pakistan, go use your nukes, right? China, go use your nukes against Taiwan, right? Even Israel, right? Israel, go use your nukes in the Middle East. I just don't. In any case, that's why I don't think it would happen. The second part of the question was, if he's overthrown, if Putin were overthrown, would the people that take over sue for peace or use nukes? Who knows? In principle, the same analysis would take place with whoever overthrows Putin with regards to whether nukes made sense. So even for them, they would say, well, it still doesn't make sense. We don't get any benefit out of using nuclear weapons. Would they sue for peace? Maybe. The war would have to be seen as such a debacle that they would be able to say, whoever overthrows Putin would be able to say he was corrupt, he was an idiot, he got us into this war, it was a disaster. In other words, they would have to do it in a way that saves face, where they're able to say, we're not saying the Russian troops failed. We're saying that guy we just overthrew, Ceausescu style, he failed. In that case, yes, that would certainly give them an out. Now, whether they would do it, the final risk, and I'll go on with the questions, is what if somebody worse than Putin takes over? What if they overthrow Putin and you get somebody even farther to the right who comes and says, we need to double and triple down and send 3 times as many men to Ukraine so that we take the whole country. We need to go after Poland. I mean, who knows, right? So it's a risk. All right. Thank you for that. Just making sure I didn't have any other questions here. I did not. All right. Close these out. All right. Let me find more questions from you guys. Oops, hang on here. Question on TickTock. Bakhmut. Do you believe nukes are still a possibility? Okay, answered that one for you. Thank you. If the Belarusian military seizes power, what do you think Putin does? That's interesting. Boy, that's interesting. If the Belarusian military seizes power, it's because they overthrew the dictator, Lukashenko, right? I will show you the handy-dandy map again. So, I'll go on to Discord afterwards. Yeah, I'll go on to Discord for 10, 15 minutes afterwards. Yeah. So, Belarus, country up here. There's a pin up there hiding in Belarus, so I don't want to hit with my hand. Ukraine's here. Russia here, but also Russia is huge. So Russia continues way north. It continues way east, okay? But Russia is basically here. Belarus is here. Poland is over here. Belarus, country run by a dictator. The Russians used Belarus to invade Ukraine. The Russians came down on their own, but they also came through Belarus and invaded this way, okay? So Belarus has been an important partner in the war for Russia. Hey, Rachel, I'll get to that in a second. A very important partner in the war for Russia. And the question has been whether Putin can get Belarus to actually invade. We believe he would like them to invade, but the Belarusian military does not like the idea of invading. They don't want to go to war in Ukraine. They don't have a very big military. And they don't have a very good military. So the thought is the Ukrainians would destroy them. There's also some concerns as to what Poland might do if Belarus were to go in and start fighting right on the Polish border. That may concern the Poles. I'm trying to think what were we saying with this? With the military takes over. I mean, the problem for the Russians is if the Belarusian military were to take out Lukashenko, who's the current dictator and who's a big friend of Putin, Putin wouldn't like that. It is possible that the new guy the military puts in place could be just as pro-Russian. It's also possible the new guy comes and says, you know what, this isn't our war. We're not going to get sucked into this. And they declare neutrality or whatever, right? If that happens, Russia's going to probably freak. The problem for Russia is, How many wars can Russia fight? I mean, in normal times, Russia might have invaded Belarus to try to reinstall their guy, right? But Belarus is up here, and it's not a small country. Russia's already fighting, all the way down. They're holding Crimea. They're afraid the Ukrainians are going to try to take Crimea back. They're holding land here. The Ukrainians are fighting all along here. They're especially fighting here. They're especially fighting here and here. Well, Russia doesn't want to have to move a ton of troops that it doesn't have all the way up here and invade the country all the way up here, right? I mean, that just it's another army they need to do that, and it would be troops that are not busy fighting here. Keep in mind, Russia doesn't have enough troops and enough weapons, it seems, to win the war down here. How are they going to start a whole other war up here? So, I mean, the Russians would not be happy if that happens, but I'm not sure what they're going to do about it. I like that. Dude, it's a t-shirt. He knows. He does know. He loves his t-shirt map. I love my t-shirt map. Rachel Hignett? I'm going to go with Hignett. A big Russian ammunition depot in the temporarily occupied Svatove Luhansk region has been bombed tonight, confirmed by the Luhansk. Oh, that's nice. Now, this is interesting. Okay, thank you for that, Rachel. This is interesting because Svatove is, I was telling you guys about the fighting going on in the east, okay? One of the areas is Bakhmut, more or less about here where my finger is, okay? That is a town, a Ukrainian town that the Ukrainians occupying, the Russians have been trying to take it. They've been trying to take it for months, and they're not doing very well. And the military folks are saying that it looks like the Russian troops have now culminated in Bakhmut, meaning they've reached the point where the men are exhausted, enough men have died, enough weapons have been expended that the Russians no longer have the ability to go on the offensive, and they're now switching to the defensive in Bakhmut. That's bad for Russia because they're trying to take the town, and you can't take the town if now you're on the defensive, right? So that's Bakhmut. North of Bakhmut, not by very far, I have to look and see what the mileage is, but it's not very far north, are two towns, Svatove and Crimea, that are very close to each other, separated by a small highway, and the Ukrainians are trying to take those two towns, which would then give them access to cutting off Russian supply lines in the east, because Russia's supplies are coming around here and going to all of the occupied territories. If the Ukrainians can take Svatove and Crimea, they can be within shooting distance and taking out the Russian supplies. So what Rachel's saying is there was a big Russian ammunition depot in Svatove that the Russians are occupying in Ukraine, and it's been bombed tonight, and it's confirmed. The Ukrainian. This is why I think we had talked at the beginning of the show that New Year's Day, like just a couple minutes, I think, into New Year's Day, the Ukrainians blew up a school where the Russians were housing something like 700 men or more in eastern Ukraine, where the Russians were occupying, and the Ukrainians claim they've killed 400 Russian troops, injured 300. The Russian government claims 63 Russians were killed. Russian military bloggers say hundreds of Russians were killed. So, thank you, Benji, for that. We should believe, I think, that several hundred Russians were killed if even the Russian military bloggers are admitting it. Well, part of the problem for the Russians, but I think part of what made this a good attack for the Ukrainians, why they went after it wasn't just several hundred troops they could kill. The Russians, stupidly enough, had housed a bunch of ammunition in the building. So when the Ukrainians hit the building, the entire ammunition storage went up, which ensured the whole building blew up and it killed everybody. And at the same time, destroyed a bunch of the Russian ammunition that was being stored. So, the Ukrainians, again, have been very good at this, at going after, basically, hold on a sec. Very good at going after the supplies the Russians need to keep fighting the war, right? You keep blowing up the ammunition. After a while, people who already don't have enough ammunition have even less ammunition. The Russians, that is. So that's really cool, Rachel. I had not seen that right before I came on. That's great. There was another report today of the Ukrainians potentially having attacked within Russia as well, but I didn't see sort of anything more on it. But the Russians were claiming it, which is interesting. What do you think NATO would have done if Russia did just steamroll Ukraine in the first 3 days? Jane Doe asks. I think we would be supporting a guerrilla war. Thank you, Maui, for the glasses. I think we by a guerrilla war, I mean Ukraine would be occupied. There would be a lot of people working secretly, and we would be secretly funding, or not even secretly funding, the Ukrainian government forces in exile, who would be basically, just like we did in Afghanistan in the 1980s, basically attacking the Russian troops by helping the locals go after them. So that's what we would have been doing. Yeah. Thank you, user, for those. User, I'm calling you. User OVK. Thank you for the hearts. I appreciate it. And Clockwise, thank you for the goggles. Let me see here. Jamie, thank you for that. Something you said last week about why we are not giving more weapons. Do you think Biden is sending better weapons slowly because no one knows where the line of being directly involved is? You know, the thing is, there's a couple different things here. I mean, we're involved. Our weapons are killing Russian troops. We're involved in this war. I mean, we're not on the ground blowing up Russians, but my God, we're giving the Ukrainians weapons that are killing Russians. It's pretty involved. I see no difference in terms of giving the Ukrainians missiles for the HIMARS that can go 60 miles versus giving them missiles for the HIMARS that can go 200 miles. What's the difference? I mean, what's the difference? I mean, the difference is they can hit more targets, but there's literally no difference, right? Dead Russian troops are dead Russian troops. I mean, either America's helping kill Russian troops or we're not, and we are. So that bothers me. Now, you see this BS argument about, well, the Ukrainians could use those rockets to fire on Russian territory. Well, I got news for you. They could use their current rockets we gave them to fire on Russian territory. 60 miles. These rockets can reach 60 miles. Let me show you the Russian border. This is the Russian border, okay? All the way over here. You know what's on the Russian border all the way over here? Ukraine. The Ukrainians control all of this land right here. All the Ukrainians would have to do is stand on the border and throw a grenade, and they'd be hitting Russian territory. All they would have to do is go to that border and use the missiles we gave them that can go 60 miles and shoot at the Russian towns that are only 20 miles away. 20 miles, 30 kilometers, right? We gave them rockets that go 60 miles. The Russian towns are only 20 miles across the border. So it's a BS argument for us to claim, well, we don't want to give them weapons that they could use at hitting the Russians in Russia. Well, they already can do that, and they're not doing it because we don't want them to. Thank you, Harold, for that. I firmly believe that Biden has gotten advice, and maybe Biden himself actually believes this on his own, but Biden has gotten advice that Putin will go crazy. You don't want to make Putin mad. You don't want to make Putin crazy. And he thinks that if we make Putin mad, Putin will use nukes and blah, 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 and we'll get dragged into the war. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true. And as the Danish intelligence folks were saying, I think it puts us in even more danger by constantly saying, we don't want to give Ukraine these weapons because Putin will get angry. We're empowering Putin by doing that. We're telling Putin, hey, we're actually afraid that you're a little crazy and that you're going to act crazy. Maybe you need to act a little more crazy, even more crazy, to scare the Americans even more, so that we're convincing Putin to be even more erratic, I would argue. Because the more erratic he is, the more he scares, the more he acts scary, the more he talks about nukes, the more we go, oh, we better not make him angry. So, yeah, there you go, Jamie. I think that's what's going on. I think somebody convinced Biden that Putin's going to go nuts. Ooh, thank you, thank you, Big Drama. That was a very cute. That was a very cute little lion king going on. Oh, that was funny. Let me see here. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, a couple more, one or two more questions, and then I'll do a quick recap here. Yeah, well, exactly. ATACMS are the longer range rockets that we all keep talking about. Let me look for Chris just Chris weighs in and says from Facebook, agreed. Thank you, inspired woman. And who is that? BSJS for the hearts there. Chris says, whoever is advising Biden is doing no one any favors, including the U.S. Putin respects strength. Former General Wesley Clark says giving the Ukrainians all they need, including ATACMS. Yeah, I mean, from what I had heard from several journalist friends, they think that the person that is scaring Biden about all of this is, I go live every Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. The person that is scaring Biden about this is our top American general, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, that he's the guy who's convinced that Putin's going to go, crazy. So there you go. All right, let me do a quick recap, and then let's call it quits here. Let me make sure I've got my notes here. Oops, those are the old notes. Here are the new notes. I almost gave you, I've still got Friday's show sitting here. Thank you for the gifts there. Let me do I'd like to do a quick little recap before the end of the show that just kind of goes over the news that we discussed today. And thank you. Who's that? BSJS for the hearts there. All right. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that we met our goal of getting $1,500 for the flashlights. So thank you for that. Who did I miss? Hold on. Agnieszka. I missed that you had a question here. Hang on. Oops. I see Jamie. Maybe you were before Jamie. Thank you for that. Where, Rachel? Where's Agnieszka's question? I'm not seeing anything from Agnieszka in the super chats. No, Ben, where are you guys talking about? Sorry, someone's saying I missed Agnieszka's question. Elise, I don't know where you mean. Oh, here we go. Here you go. Oh, sorry. Who is this retired Colonel McGregor, and what are his connections to Russia? I don't know. I really hate to hear him comment on the war in Ukraine, always in favor of Russia. I have no idea. Where do you hear this guy? I've never heard the guy. What channel is he on? Thank you, Mars. What channel is he on? I don't know where you're hearing him, but I have no idea who the guy is. I have no idea. Sorry. But there are a lot of bad people out there, so I'm not surprised. All right, let me give you guys the quick recap. So yes, we got the flashlights for the Ukrainian staff for the charity. Thank you to your guys' contributions for that. The Israeli government has decided it needs to be friendlier to Russia in its war with Ukraine. I thought that was kind of inappropriate. European Union ambassador says the European Union decreased Russian oil imports by 90% in 2022. Then I talked at length about an interview that Danish intelligence gave with a publication called Berlinska, and they talked about their analysis of Putin and the war in Ukraine, etc. Very interesting. They said the invasion did not fail. The invasion didn't fail because of Russia's corruption. It failed because of Putin's bad decision making. Thank you, BS. I appreciate that. Putin is still interfering with the war by going and micromanaging. The Russians almost won the war at the beginning, but then weren't able to get air supremacy, which sort of shot that opportunity. The Danish intelligence does not think that the Ukrainians are going to that the Russians will have a big counteroffensive in the spring, which is something the Ukrainians are worried about, because Danish intelligence says they just don't think the Russians have enough equipment or men to do it. Regarding Putin's red lines, the analysis pretty much was you've got to be very careful about saying that we don't want Ukraine to take back Crimea, because that kind of an attitude could be exactly what inspires Putin to try to take even more land, because he perceives it as weakness. Putin being deposed, Danish intelligence does not see anybody deposing him in the near future. Putin being ill, they believe that Putin did have cancer, probably thyroid cancer, something like that, and that what's actually going on with him now is back pain because of falling off a horse, judo injuries, hockey injuries, and not actual leftovers from the cancer, basically. Jamie, let me get yours as soon as I'm done with this. And then finally, he will not die of the illness. He will not be dying from his cancer if he has it still, but his cancer and his ongoing weakness or pain from the falls and everything else could eventually lead Russian elites to say this guy is too weak and he projects weakness and we can't have him lead the country anymore. But they don't see that happening anytime soon. Jamie, last question here. Do you think Biden could be slow walking in the probably giving the weapons to Ukraine? Jamie means slow walking in the hope. Oops, hang on. Slow walking in the hope Ukraine negotiates and no one wins. Again, from something you said last week. Yeah. I think what Biden is doing is Biden wants to. Okay, we can't let Russia win. Because if Russia wins, they'll be emboldened to then go after NATO allies and other countries, right? So that's bad. We can't let Ukraine win by getting all of its territory back because Biden thinks Ukraine, this is me channeling Biden, because Biden thinks, Vladimir Putin will use his nukes if Ukraine tries to get back Crimea, right? So we need a situation where Ukraine's able to get back a lot of its land, but not all of its land. And eventually Ukraine and Russia both say, this isn't worth it anymore. We just can't go any further, right? We've got to negotiate. We want to give Ukraine enough weapons that they don't get defeated, but not enough weapons that they win. And it finally, so that the war drags on, and finally Ukraine and Russia both say, gosh, we've got to reach some kind of negotiated settlement. That's what I think is motivating Biden. So, and I think it's immoral, and it's also just, I think, wrong. So there. All right, guys. I am going to get going. We can, you know what? Let me skip the Discord tonight, just because I'm feeling like my throat's bothering me a little bit. It's getting scratchy. I'm hoping I'm not getting something. But it's getting a little scratchy, so I'd rather maybe skip the Discord tonight. But do go and check out the Discord. Like I said, we've got the Azov-style bracelet and a number of things for the auction is ending tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow morning even. So go and some stamps too. We've got more of the Ukrainian commemorative stamps. That auction is up tomorrow as well. So don't miss out. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to go, and I will see you guys tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern. And same bat time, same bat channel. All right. All right, guys. Let me see you tomorrow. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you for the moderators, as always. And thank you guys for joining us. Appreciated. Not so thanks for the trolls, but the trolls are funny at least. All right. Bye, guys.